In this tutorial, we'll look at how to create traffic using splines and XML files. Here we have a few pre-prepared splines. These splines lead along a main road, and as we can see, they point in different directions. The end of each spline are marked with an S or an E, indicating the direction of each spline. In Farming Simulator 15, traffic can only travel down these splines in one direction. Therefore, we have to create separate splines for each direction. Then here we have another transform group which serves as a crossing of sorts. The splines in here are needed to allow the traffic to turn. So we have to make sure that the starting point of one spline is always placed at the end point of the another. The distance between these 2 points must not be too large, otherwise traffic won't be able to switch from spline to spline, and we will inadvertently create a dead end, preventing the traffic from flowing freely. Now let's complete our crossing and get to know some commands for editing splines in the process. First, we need to create a new spline, in this case, a straightforward junction on the top lane. Click on Create Spline in the menu. Then we move the spline we've just created into the transform group by using Ctrl X to cut it and then Ctrl V to paste it into the correct group. Now we click on an empty area of the scene graph so we can select the control points of the spline more easily. Next, we move the 2 endpoints so they match up to the start and end points of the other connecting splines. Then we move the middle control point of the spline to adjust the course the vehicle will take. While moving these middle points, we can use the page down key to adjust the height of their path. This is absolutely necessary, as without it, cars will be floating in the air rather than driving across the terrain. While having vehicles a short distance above the ground may be tolerable, it is best to try and match the control points to the road as closely as possible. The 2 missing sections of splines can be easily created by duplicating the existing splines and then modifying their control points. As before, we can duplicate the splines with a keyboard shortcut Ctrl D. In some cases, we may find it helpful to invert the direction of the splines. This can be done easily by pressing the R key. We can rotate the splines with the Home and End keys. But for our current scenario, it's faster if we simply move the control points. Now we've completed our crossing. Let's take a look at how best to load our splines into Farming Simulator 15. First, we'll take a closer look at the transform group Traffic Splines. It has 2 user attributes. First, it has a script callback type attribute with a name onCreate and a value of traffic system point onCreate. This attribute ensures that all splines in the transform group are added to the transport system. These include the splines in the transform group Crossroad 01. We can create any number of these types of transform groups. The second user attribute is a string type called XML file and has a value of traffic system point XML. So you'll need to make sure you have the appropriate point XML file in the same folder as the map. We may then need to copy this file from the installation directory of Farming Simulator 15. If we take a closer look at this file, we can see that the different vehicles are defined here. We only really need to edit it if we want to add any new vehicles, so we can close the file again. It's easy to tell whether the splines have been loaded into the game correctly by whether they are visible or invisible. If they have been detected and loaded correctly, they are invisible. It's also worthwhile to keep checking the log for error messages, as we may have placed the endpoint of one spline too far from the start point of another. When this happens, an error message will be displayed in the log.